Hi everyone. Um, so, trading APY, impermanent loss, liquidation, DeFi, Luna. What do those words mean to you? To me, there is a symptom of a big problem that we have in DeFi. We are not able to properly assess performances and risks of the products we use. My name is Cyrille Pastour. I'm the co-founder of Swaap. We are an automated market maker that is focused on LP profitability. And today, I would like to share with you the outcome of a research that we did as part of our project, which basically tries to better understand the performance and risk that you take when being an LP into an AMM. First, I will remind you of what AMMs are, how they work, what are their advantages and the drawbacks. Then I will share a proposed framework for assessing their performances. And last but not least, I will share a proposed, the findings of our study. So, first, what are AMMs? So as a reminder, AMMs are new financial alternatives which enable on-chain assets to be liquid. There are smart contracts that are deployed on the blockchain, and that basically allow anyone to be what is called a liquidity provider. Liquidity provider is different assets into pools. Those assets are used by traders to basically buy assets. For instance, if you're a trader that wants to buy Bitcoin, you can go to a liquidity pool, an AMM like Swaap, for instance, pay fee on pay a permission and have access to this asset instantly. AMMs have found great adoption with this fact, because today we have over 17 billions of TVL in AMMs in DeFi. So what are their advantages and drawbacks? First, the really cool thing about AMMs is that they're acceptable to anyone. In traditional finance or centralized finance, there are usually some requirements of the size and actually very well connection if you want to be able to be an LP. This is not the case in AMMs. Anyone can be an LP anytime with any ties. Second, there's no price. Their yield and how they make it is completely available for anyone to others. And this has great community because it has some dramatic stories which happen to centralized actors, like, for instance, 3 Hours Capital. So 3 Hours Capital was a market maker and hedge fund which blew up last year. Essentially, they were taking leverage positions on Luna without telling their investors. This cannot happen with an AMM. Another great feature of AMMs is that they are non-custodial. So essentially, you cannot, whether you're LP into an AMM or trade on an AMM, you always have access to your funds. You're facing smart input risk, but you cannot lose your funds like you would on LGX. Last but not least, they are fully interoperable with the DeFi, which means that you can use the LP tokens in other setups with others by borrowing. For instance, borrowing against your LP tokens. There are some drawbacks. One of the major drawbacks is the performances of AMS, and we will come back to this in a few seconds. The other major drawback is that AMMs require significant sophistication for the latest innovation. So 2 years ago, Swaap released Uniswap 3, which is a concentrated liquidity in AMMs, and now more and more AMMs start with those. It's designed where each provider can be very active. So it's not, in practice, it's not accessible to anyone because you have to be very sophisticated to be able to help you with this design professionally. So then you lead to another part of my presentation, which is around how you assess financial performances. But in finance in general, you always want to look at strategies based on two LRS. First, the return, and second, the risk. And this is very important to take into consideration. So return community is what you get at the end of the year, and I think everyone on crypto is about us. We should be, however, careful. Like net returns are important. It's not about trading APY. It's really about what you have at the end of the year. Then the other thing you want to take into consideration is risk. So first, what is it? Risk essentially can be measured in different ways, but most of the time you use a variable consider income, which is, okay, you have an average return. How is it spread? For instance, if you earn finance per year, is it 1 year you have 20% and the other year you have 92% per finance? Or is it 5% every year? Then the other thing that you want to measure is what is called the max drawdown, which is how much you lose on a given investment. So it's essential to have risk in mind, because risk is essential for financial planning. For instance, if you want to buy a house in 2 years, maybe you manage the risk before, because you want to have taken a fast to be able to buy that house. The other thing is that net risk gap that can be used as collateral in other protocols. Then the second question is the question of the benchmark. So for AMMs, the right benchmark is probably Poly, because when you're going to an AMM, you want to other for a strategy which is, for instance, for feeding, dipole, velocity, 1 ETH and 1,000, you want to outperform this strategy. You want to compute the return and the risk against all. And that, the last question is, which type of data should you use? So here, I think we should think for a complementary approach of realized data and simulated data. Why? So realized data obviously are very important to study a historical performances of an asset, because there is no such thing as reality to understand what things are wrong or not. However, realized data are very limited in the sense that in realized data, only one or the many things that can happen on the market about. So therefore, it can give really more predictor of the future. For instance, if you had to be an investor to USD, right for the flash, you could have thought that it was a very same as phase of realized data, but it went to zero. So in fact, it was not the very thing at that right. So that's why the simulations are very important. What are simulations? Essentially, you modelize an environment, you throw status of finance market conditions, and you see what happens and how the strategy is behaving in those various environments. And that's what we did with Swaap recently. So the problem with simulation, obviously, is that there are something that you cannot simulate, that you cannot anticipate, and that's why you need both CLS data and simulation. So let's see how it works when we apply this with AS. So first, if we look at realized data, we see that traditional automated market makers are having in the red. There have been several studies which have looked at. One of them is a study by Bank4 in 2021, which showed that 50% of liquidity providers in the UDB had negative returns. This was later confirmed by another study by someone on Twitter named CC who basically displayed an analysis which was later confirmed by Swaap, showing that the aggregated P&L of LPs on one level, the US 5 basis fund pool, was negative by $100 million. So pretty bad realized performances, unfortunately, on aggregate. So how can we use simulations and what will they tell us about AI? So to answer this question, with Swaap we created the AMM simulator. It's essentially a tool that allows us to modelize the performances and the risks of any AMM strategy. For that, we use hypotheses around the market price, around the trading demand, so the size and the frequency of price, and we compute the returns of markets of AMM across thousands of market conditions. Then we put those results on a matrix with both the return and the risk. So essentially, the return is the average of the returns for each of the market conditions. And the risk is the variability of those returns. So then, based on this matrix, you can actually define several zones where you want to be, right, or not to be. So what I call the value zone, essentially, is when you're on the top left, because when you're on the top left, essentially you have high returns with very low risk. So you're gonna make it. What we can define as well is what I call the gambling zone, which is where you are when you are at the casino. So you have a negative return, expected return, with a super high risk. So in other words, on average you lose, but sometimes you can win big, and most of the time you lose big. So where are AMMs in traditional AMMs in this matter? Well, I have bad names, if you want to know. They are in the gambling zone. So traditional AMMs are actually closer to casino products than investment products. So what you see here are different implementations of Uniswap v2 in gray, so with a bevel piece, and Curve v2 in red, with different kinds of parameters. We are talking about a pair which is uncorrelated, so a pair like ETH and USDC. And what we see is that essentially both AMMs are for each type of implementation in the red zone. So not totally right. Then what we see as well is that Oracle-based solutions outperform Oracle-free solutions. So what we did then is that we introduced a strategy in which you just have the AMM trace at the Oracle price with compete that you add on top of it. And what we see is that in the simulations, essentially Oracle-based solution, even a naive Oracle-based solution, outperform the current AMMs that we have. So that's another very interesting finding, so that information is very essential when designing AMMs. And then we have a good news. So actually we found an efficiency model. So essentially what we did is that we tried first to implement Swaap v1 in our simulator. So Swaap v1 is the version of our protocol that has been live for a bit less than a year on Polygon. And Swaap v1 essentially in terms of realized data is like a low risk low return strategy. So it has a net yield based on the ETH pool of 1.5%. So net yield is really what you put in your pockets at the end of the year. It has an annualized increment loss of 0.1%, with a volatility that is 10x lower than traditional AMMs like Uni or Curve, for instance. And so what we see here is that in the simulation environment, it's actually very coherent with what's like the realized data show. So a very like low risk, low return strategy. But we have found something better. So during our research work, we found essentially some equations which allow us to implement different risk levels for Swaap. So the call Swaap v2. And with this model, essentially, we are able, by increasing slightly the risk tolerance of our equation, to increase the returns substantially. So the Swaap v2, like the yellow dots that you can see here on the graph with different implementation parameters. And that's not all. So besides innovating on models, with Swaap v2, we're going to essentially adopt a new architecture, which is going to enable us to have a 30x increase in data latency, so more efficient oracles, especially because we're using oracles as part of our design. And we are also going to be able to market a wider breadth of token, including yield-bearing tokens, thanks to this new architecture. So so essentially, as part of the launch, we are releasing a whitelist for people who are early to our V2 products, and also to enjoy exclusive benefits. So if you would like to try it out, don't hesitate to flash this QR code that will direct you to a server. Thank you very much. Maybe I can take one. Yeah. So because you don't want to talk about the specifics of your model, so I'll ask you if you Swaap, then do you notice big differences in risk return versus V2 versus V3? Like, if you ever find paying space, something you not just... Yeah, that's a great question. The reason why we did it with V2 is that Uniswap V3 depends heavily on the like the algorithm implementation, on the range that should happen. So we could design, for instance, like kind of automated arbitrages, but that would essentially be you need more leverage, because if you don't have direct hobby goods, that's essentially what Mayfree is. So you need to on leverage. So if you don't have you don't adjust super fast your ranges, assume that V3 is proportional to the V2 square. Yeah, but still the negative. And yeah, and if you have direct monitoring system, the difference that as I was saying, in terms of realized data, people are losing money on your stack. Thank you. Okay. All right, thank you very much.